The hockey world mourns the tragic passing of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew, who were killed in an accident on Thursday night in New Jersey. We're going to discuss his hockey legacy and what he meant to the communities he played for, both Columbus, Calgary, and his college days at BC. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The hockey world is mourning the untimely and tragic death of Johnny Gaudreau, the Columbus Blue Jackets forward who passed away with his brother on Friday in a accident. He was on a bicycle. He was hit by a car. The driver allegedly under the influence of alcohol. Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets joins us to discuss Johnny Gaudreau, what he meant to the Blue Jackets, and the impact of this terrible tragedy on both the team and the community. Jay, talk to me a little bit about Johnny Gaudreau, both the hockey player and the man.
I think the thing that's going to stick with me with Gaudreau is, and again, I've seen a lot of, since the news broke early Friday morning, I've seen so many stories about like what a great person he was, or like funny stories. Like he was apparently known for like his pranks in Calgary, which is very funny. But like the thing that's going to stick to me, and I've got a lot of really great Johnny Gaudreau memories, but he chose Columbus at a time when no one else chose Columbus. You know, he was, I think it's fair to say, the biggest star that had ever chosen to be a Blue Jacket. He wasn't drafted here. He wasn't traded here. He chose to come here in free agency. And I think that is going to be like his lasting influence on this community is going to be, he chose us when he could have chosen, you know, he could have gone to New Jersey. He could have gone to Philadelphia. He could have gone to the Islanders. He didn't. He chose Columbus. And I think that's what's really going to stick with me more than the goals, more than, you know, the impact he had on the ice. I think it's going to be the off the ice impact that I think is really going to stick with me and stick with a lot of people as we kind of continue to grieve and mourn.
On the ice, was there one moment or a couple of moments that really stood out in your mind that just, you know, make you think about Johnny Gaudreau?
So for me, it's his first goal as a Blue Jacket, which I just saw someone else had posted on Twitter not long ago. And I remember the goal so clearly that like I knew what the goal it was before they even got to the end of it. And it was, I think, the fourth game of the season against the Vancouver Canucks. The Blue Jackets hadn't won a game yet that season. And he hadn't scored a goal yet. And people were kind of getting antsy about it. And it was this like coast to coast, skate around three people, round the back of the net, wrap around goal. And I remember watching that and just thinking like, things are going to be different in Columbus. Like, I know that I don't want to say underperformed in Columbus, because I think he did a pretty great job while he was here, but he didn't ever hit that 100-point mark that he hit in his last season in Calgary. And I think that was a disappointment for a lot of people. But I remember watching that goal and thinking, yeah, now I understand why people in Calgary talk about him the way that they do, because he's just one of those players that looks like nothing's happening and then everything is happening. And so his first goal as a Blue Jacket is going to be something that I think I'm going to remember for a long time, just because of the way it made me feel about him and kind of about the team in general.
And then, as far as his involvement in the community, Johnny Gaudreau, the teammate, Johnny Gaudreau, the member of the Columbus community.
It's fascinating that, and I feel like no matter how beloved a player seems to be by like their team, by their fan base, there's always someone from another team or whatever, or another fan base that is like, well, I don't like him because of this. What we've seen has been this outpouring of, and I've seen it from fans of every single team, about how much he loved the game, how much he like just played with this kind of unfettered joy, and he had a big impact on this team. He had a big impact on the community. I think, I don't want to dwell too much on the sadness of this event, but all of the Instagram stories that have kind of been rolling in from teammates and, the younger players on the team specifically, like Kent Johnson wore 13 growing up because he was a small forward that loved to watch Johnny Gaudreau, and he gave up 13 when Johnny came to Columbus. Cole Sillinger grew up in the Calgary area. There's a picture of him as a young child wearing a Gaudreau jersey, So like, I don't think people realize the impact he had on what it means to be a small forward in this league. You hear the funny stories about how in his draft year he was like hiding pucks in his jockstrap to try and desperately weigh over 140 pounds because he was still so small and undersized. And through all of that, he still made it as an NHL player and as an NHL star. The Columbus community, I think, one of the last time he spoke to the media as a Blue Jacket, he talked about Patrick Laine and talked about, we're waiting for Patrick to get out of the program. We wish him the best. He actually, while Patrick was in the program, he took over his Patrick Laine was doing like a not a challenge necessarily, but had committed to donating $1,000 for every goal that he scored this season. And that was going to go to a men's mental health charity in Columbus. And when he went into the program, Johnny Gaudreau took over that initiative and was like, for every point I get, goal, assist, it doesn't matter, I'm going to give $1,000 to this in Laine's name. And that's just the kind of, again, that's something that's going to stick with me, is that commitment to his teammate, that commitment to the community, and just, it's just such a loss, man,
I mean, even his nickname, Johnny Hockey, it just exudes the joy that he seemed to have playing this game.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's, he loved this sport, and I think it's easy to say, of course he was an NHL player. Of course he loved hockey. Otherwise, why would he be here? But like you said, Johnny Hockey, like, was his nickname. He was hockey for a lot of people, and beloved in Calgary. Outside the Saddle Dome in Calgary, there are hundreds of bunches of flowers and jerseys and tributes, bottles of purple Gatorade, which was his favorite flavor, packets of Skittles because that was his favorite candy. And there's similar happening in Nationwide as well. We're seeing stuff from people who don't follow the sport. We're seeing Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, tweeted about him. You look at what he did for USA Hockey as a younger player, and again playing in the most recent World Championships on Team USA. Like, that was the last time I think that might have been the last time he played a game, would have been at that World Championships with Team USA. So, like, just to go back to what I talked about a little bit earlier, he's one of those guys that is, again, just kind of beloved by everyone. No one has a bad word to say about him, and that's how he's going to be remembered, is as a guy who loved his team, who loved the game of hockey, and who loved his family.
How does this impact the team right before training camp? I mean, how is the team, the players, the organization going to process this and move forward?
I've been struggling with this thought all day, because it feels so like we shouldn't even be talking about that. Like, hockey doesn't matter right now. And I genuinely, I don't know. Like, how do you put your skates on in 2 weeks knowing that one of your friends should be there with you and isn't. We talked a little bit about Sean Monahan, who signed in Columbus specifically to play with Johnny Gaudreau. He wanted to play with his best friend, and now he doesn't get to do that anymore. I don't know how players that were on the team in 2021 when Matisse Kivlenieks passed away, they have to go through this again. I genuinely not drawing on personal experience per se, but I know that the incident last season in the UK with Adam Johnson of the Nottingham Panthers died mid-season. That team didn't recover. They didn't play games for a month after the incident happened, and then and it's completely understandable, but as a team, they didn't. I think they won 2 games entirely for the rest of the season. So it sucks to think about. It really does, and I don't know yet how I'm going to have the conversation of here's how the Blue Jackets recover from this on the ice, because it feels like it's so far from everyone's thoughts. But I genuinely, if it was me, I don't know how I would pull on my skates in 2 weeks and get ready for training camp like normal. He was a huge part of this team. I know that there were critics saying that he was overpaid and underperforming his contract, but he was one of the faces of this team, and I don't know how the team is going to react to him being gone on the ice any more than I know how they're going to cope off the ice. I hope that the team has things in place for players to speak to, staff to speak to, because I think that's an underlooked thing is, the ushers, the people who would greet him, the security, people like the equipment people, the office workers, they all interacted with him as well, so I really hope that the team and the NHL is giving these people all of the support that they need, because it's not just the 21 other men on the ice that need this, or the 20 other men on the ice. I can't do math on the fly. It's gonna have a ripple effect, I think, for this team for a very, very long time.
No question about that. Jay, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media and your co-host?
So you can find me on Twitter at LO_. That's the show Twitter. LO_Blue Jackets is the show on Twitter. I'm at _Jacob Forster, JAKOBFORSTER. There will not be a show for a couple of days because I don't think that it's a show that we want to rush into. But we will at some point next week be recording a tribute episode to Johnny Gaudreau. We're going to look at all of the great moments from the 2015 All-Star game where he wanted to light his stick on fire for the skills competition and they wouldn't let him, to, stories of one time in college he wrote a paper on how to make a ham and cheese sandwich. There's just such a great personality off the ice. So we're going to talk about all of those great memories, all of the on the ice memories, and all of that stuff. So that's going to be probably Wednesday on Locked On Blue Jackets. You can find that wherever you get Locked On NHL. We're on all podcast apps and over on YouTube.
Jay, thank you so much, and just sorry we had to talk at this difficult time.
Yeah, thanks, Gil. I appreciate it.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So if your favorite team plays outside of your hometown, or you want to keep track of all the players on your fantasy league, or if you're just a huge football fan, this is the offer for you. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. I welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Flames, Jess Belmosto. And Jess, I wish this was under better circumstances. The tragic passing of Johnny Gaudreau on Thursday night, right before his sister's wedding. He and his brother riding their bicycles, killed by an allegedly drunk driver. And when you think about Johnny Gaudreau, what is the first thing that comes to mind regarding him? Let's start as a hockey player.
An underdog, small 5'9" kid from South Jersey that ate way too much Nutella and made himself sick in an attempt to bulk up ahead of his draft year. Just an underdog, and someone that just, like, you weren't laughing at him, you were laughing with him because of just how, like, innocent and naive these events were.
He ended up scoring a goal in his very first game in a Calgary Flames uniform. What do you remember about that game and what it meant to Johnny Gaudreau?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone scoring in their first NHL appearance is, just something you dream of as a kid. And Johnny brought a lot of faith and fans back to Calgary hockey after the Iginla era. And for someone that was so easy to root for to, find that immediate success, I think the fans really latched onto him. There's something like you see yourself in him. Like there's some sort of relatability factor. And I think just like that charm that you're just like, okay, like it is so easy to root for him.
Is there one moment or one game that just stands out during his time in Calgary?
I mean, I would have to say it's the Game 7 overtime winner against Dallas back in 2022, because, I mean, that season was unprecedented for the entire roster. But for him to finish the regular season with 115 points and to just be a hero at home, and to run down the tunnel to meet his best friend, Sean Monahan, who was out due to season-ending hip surgery, and just give him a giant hug. Like, you can't script that. It's it goes to show you that, like, he's great on the ice and off the ice, and he values both aspects of his life so deeply.
In the community in Calgary, I mean, what will fans remember him most for, not just as a player, but as a person?
I really think it's just him being so family oriented and just being like, there was no ego when it came to Johnny. It didn't matter if it was a game day or an off day. He would, if he saw someone in a Flames jersey, he would, take the time to, like, acknowledge them and take pictures, stop and talk with them, whatever the case may be. And him and his wife did a lot for the Calgary community. And I think that, even though he did leave in free agency, there was a part in that he'd written in his Player Tribune article that, he wanted to take his family back to Calgary and show his kids, how special the city was, and show them places like the Saddle Dome and the Stampede and the parts of Calgary that, formed him into who he is.
How is this tragic occurrence affecting some of his former teammates?
The posts that we have seen on Instagram or team related press releases they're gut wrenching. This was a guy who was so likable and genuine as a normal human being and an excellent teammate. And people really admired him. And Sean Monahan had just talked a few weeks ago on a podcast that was just recently released about how excited he was to reunite and play with Johnny again in Columbus. And for that clip to be released 24 hours before any of this is just like, it is so upsetting. And to realize everyone lost something.
To your knowledge, and it may be too soon to know this, but are there any plans by the Flames organization to pay tribute to Johnny Gaudreau once the season starts?
I haven't heard anything, but I do know, I wouldn't be surprised. They have, last season they did right by Chris Snow after he'd passed away. And fans have come together and already said, like, for the home opener, we're all going to wear our Gaudreau jerseys or Gaudreau shirts. There will absolutely be something done by the organization. I don't know what.
As far as his former teammates are concerned, I mean, how do you process this and then get ready for training camp in a couple of weeks?
I have no idea, especially for those players in Columbus that also just lost a teammate a few seasons ago. Like, it's, I think, 2 out of the last 3 off seasons. For Calgary, I mean, sure, they've had a lot of turnover and a lot of those players that were there that kind of coexisted at that same time aren't there anymore. But there are still some, like Blake Coleman, Michael Backlund. Rasmus Anderson posted something today that was like absolutely devastating. And I don't know how you can compartmentalize this and, move forward. I think there are definitely certain things like a loss, a regular game loss that, okay, we move on. There's 81 more games this season. Losing someone to this extent, I think, you can't get through this by yourself. I think that it's times like this where the hockey community really does rally together and show that it doesn't matter who you root for. Like, we're all here for each other.
Jess, thanks for doing this. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media? I'm sure you'll have more coverage of the Johnny Gaudreau situation.
Yes, absolutely. So you can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On Flames on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. And you can follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you're calling it these days, at Jess Belmosto. And we'll definitely be doing some more memorializing of taking a trip down memory lane with Johnny Gaudreau.
All right, Jess, thank you so much. And next time, under better circumstances.
I certainly hope so, Gil.
It is my pleasure to welcome into the show AJ Black of Locked On BC. I wish it were under better circumstances, but AJ, the Gaudreau brothers, tragically passing away after being involved in an accident. They were on bicycles. The driver of the car that hit them Friday night was allegedly under the influence. What impact does the passing of the Gaudreau brothers, who both played hockey at BC, have on the community?
It's devastating for Boston College fans. Johnny Gaudreau was, and Matt Gaudreau too, were pillars of this program. Johnny won the national title for Boston College in 2012, coming completely out of nowhere. This was a kid that was a Northeastern decommit. He and his brother were heading to the Huskies. They both end up at Boston College. His first year was magical. Like, I've never seen a hockey player play the way that I saw Johnny Gaudreau play. And the season that he had, he wins the Hobie Baker in 2012, wins the national title against Ferris State, and he basically gets the game winner. Ferris was coming back in that game, and they were putting the pressure on Johnny Gaudreau, just like every game he ever played at Boston College. No pressure on him at all. This guy was cold as ice when he was out there, and the smoothest player I've ever seen. Goes out there and wins it for Boston College. He was beloved on campus. Everyone had Johnny hockey shirts in the student section. To have his brother come with him, I can't even, I can't imagine, like right now, I it's fun to talk about hockey, like to think back of all that positive, but like, I just can't imagine what that family's going through right now. And my thoughts are so much with that family and the friends of him, because it's like, this is so senseless and it's a tough spot for everybody. And I feel so much for his family right now. It's both of their families, Maddie and Johnny.
Yeah. I mean, right on the eve of their sister's wedding, Matthew's wife expecting a child, and it's just so horrible. And they were just so young, and it's very difficult to talk about. Are there any moments that stand out in your mind about his time in BC, and that just stand out in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, just the way he came onto the scene at BC, they had a early season tournament, and they were playing North Dakota, who was a national powerhouse in hockey, and they were predicted to win that tournament, North Dakota. And Johnny Gaudreau, in his first, I think it was like his first 2 or 3 games, he scores 4 goals in this tournament and beats North Dakota 6-2. And after that moment, you never knew what he would bring. Like every game was like, it was like watching a magician out there. This is his kid. He's 5'9", and that's being generous. He was a small dude, and he could do things that you never saw before out of a hockey player. And I'm not just saying that to be, over the top, but he really was. He was a magician out there, the way he could move the puck, the way that he could get around guys. And the stories that you hear about him off campus were even better. Like, there's BC fans out there today. They're like, yeah, Johnny Gaudreau came to my son's baseball game because we invited him to. There's other ones that are like, we saw him on campus and he couldn't have been nicer. That was what Johnny Gaudreau is. So this isn't just about losing a hockey player. This is about losing a great man. This is about 2 great men, because Matty Gaudreau is as good as Johnny Gaudreau everywhere he was. And the impact that he had around the community was as big as Johnny. Like, Johnny's the name everyone talks about, but like Matty should be talked about too, because, he didn't have the hockey career, but he was a great person too. And it's again, like, the hockey part is so important, because Johnny was, this figure. Like, it's funny because it's not funny, but like BC, that's our thing. Like, we got shorter guys like Doug Flutie, you got Johnny Gaudreau. Those are our goats right there in terms of hockey and football. And they're both 5'9" plus. But Johnny Gaudreau, his impact on the school, the way that, he wins the Hobie Baker, I can remember the band started to play Johnny Be Good every time he'd get out there. And just, the stands were packed every game for him, because you never knew when he was going to go to the NHL. You took every game that Johnny Gaudreau played at Boston College as his last game, and you appreciated every moment that he was out there. Because he played out there with some, with Kevin Hayes and Bill Arnold, who were both good players, and, Thatcher Demko. There's future NHL guys, but everyone, you watched it, and you watched Johnny, and every time he touched that puck, you glued yourself to the TV and goes, what is he going to do next? And I think the best part of it all is every Boston College fan, everyone who followed that program, you knew when he got to the NHL, people were not going to take him as they wouldn't respect him like they would with Kevin Hayes, who was like 6'7" or whatever. He was huge, right? But we knew that once he got there, it didn't matter his size. He was going to be awesome. And that was exactly what we saw. He gets to Calgary, and he immediately turns into the player in the NHL that we saw in college. And we're like, see, this kid's special. And he was special. And every moment that he had in the NHL, I'm a Bruins guy. I'm from Boston, obviously. You can hear it in my voice. But to watch, I would turn on the Flames anytime I could just to watch Johnny Gaudreau. And I loved it. And I think he only got 31 years on this earth. But, it was a joy. It was a pleasure just to experience what he brought to the rink and outside the rink.
Any tributes planned, or is it too soon right now to know what the program is going to do?
I haven't heard anything. Greg Brown, the new head coach, he and Jerry York. Jerry York was Johnny Gaudreau's coach. Both had spoken about the loss, but I haven't heard anything yet. My hope is both of their numbers get retired, Maddie and Johnny, because they do. Like they were Boston College. They were, the heart and soul of this program for a long time. Their families were integral to the school. They won a national title. Like, put their numbers in the rafters so we can all look at them and talk about what the Gaudreaus meant to BC and how special they were to the community, because they were. That's what they were.
AJ, I want to thank you for doing this. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find your podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, thank you, Gil. I'm on Locked On Boston College. We'll be talking about Gaudreau, and we'll talk about the Florida State game coming up for football, but I got to talk more about Johnny on our show on Locked On BC. You can follow us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow my work at AJ Black 247, and I'm the editor of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 network. You can see my written work, and we have a great tribute up right now on Eagle Insider to the Gaudreaus from my writer, who was one of the equipment managers when he was there and knew them both really well. So I hope you guys can go check that out. It's totally free. You can go check it out now.
AJ, thank you so much, and I wish that we were doing this under better circumstances.
Me too, Gil. Have a good one.
You too. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On NHL Prospects. They will give you the latest updates and news on the future of the NHL with great players from juniors and college and overseas. Locked On NHL Prospects keeps you up to date on the best prospects outside the NHL all year long. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guest, Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets, Jess Belmosto of Locked On Flames, and of course, AJ Black of Locked On Boston College for joining me today and discussing the tragic events concerning Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew. Don't forget, we are here every Monday through Friday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the National Hockey League. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.